Strange Brew Podcast, Season 1, Episode 329.
Oh, somebody kill me, please! Somebody kill me, please!
Why do we do this? We had to do one on Sunday. I've got to get this off my chest. I'm sure many diehard Packer fans like myself are struggling with a hangover maybe on Sunday morning. I just can't wrap my mind around the last 6 days. Well, I can. Unfortunately, I can. This seems to be an epidemic among Wisconsin sports teams in the last 20 or 25 years, it feels like, with some rare exceptions. But that was one of the more gut-wrenching losses, regular season losses that I can remember. We talked about last week comparing the Denver game to the 2014 NFC Championship game, and I scoffed and I said, the stakes weren't the same. The game script wasn't really the same. Yeah, you blew a lead. There weren't devastating injuries in the 2014 NFC Championship game. Other than having a lead and blowing it, it didn't seem to match up a lot with me. Well, we may have manifested it in this game. Just by talking about it the amount that we did last week, we may have manifested the regular season version of the 2014 NFC Championship game because the game script could not have looked more identical. It's the Spider-Man meme. That game, the game script, and the stakes aren't the same still. We're not talking about the Super Bowl, and there are still regular season games left, and the Packers can still make the playoffs, and they can still win the division, honestly. We'll talk about that toward the end of the podcast and try to get you to a more positive headspace by the time we get to the end of this thing. It won't be positive to start it, that much we can say. So there are a lot of nuanced differences there just in terms of how big that game was to get to the Super Bowl, and this is still the regular season. But when you look at how it all went down, it is almost identical. So the sports god said, here you go, just in case you forgot. We're going to break it all down. We're going to make that comparison. I want to just go blow by blow. I got a lot of stuff that is just rattling around in my brain. I'm not sure how much the sequencing is going to make sense on this podcast, even though we have had now... I think I went to bed at 1 o'clock, so I think I've had about 12 hours. I did catatonically listen to post-game for about 2 hours last night, even though I knew it wasn't going to change the outcome. And in that way, it was very much like the 2014 NFC Championship game. But even with the 12 hours since I went to bed and got up and did the whole Sunday thing, I went for a run. I had some coffee, a little spiked coffee. I had about 24 Christmas cookies, helping Mom with that yesterday. Even now, I still don't think I have my thought process exactly where I want it to be, but I want to talk about LaFleur. I want to talk about Rich Bisaccia, Keyshawn Nixon, Rashawn Gary. Of course, we're going to have to talk about Malik Willis and Jordan Love as well. After Malik, for the most part, up until that play in the fourth quarter on 4th and 1, played really well in place of Love after Love left with a concussion because he was headhunted. We're going to talk about that too. Let's go.
On the ground, a chance here. Durham to Hardy to first. In time! Yes! The Brewers win! Yes!
Here comes Melvin to the 25, to the 20, Gordon 15, 10, 5, touchdown! Wisconsin! Record-breaking run!
Morgan a smash up the middle, base hit to center. Here comes Gomez around third. A throw and the Brewers win!
Here's the snap. He looks, he throws, it's complete interception. And there is your Super Bowl dagger.
Booker the drive, gets inside, leans in, knocked away and stolen by Holiday. Phoenix has to foul, a pinnacle ball, throws it down.
Swinging fly ball in the right center. Broxton is there, and they're the champions. They have done it.
It's been a 50-year journey. Wisconsin, we've got a room at the top of the world tonight. The Milwaukee Bucks are NBA champions.
Yeah, welcome in Sunday morning. You know, we have a mug at our office at 2100 Washington Avenue in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. And my close friends at work, we always say when we get minorly inconvenienced or something agitates us that isn't all that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things, but it agitates you just on a regular Monday through Friday, something stupid happens at work basis. There is a coffee mug in our break room that I think has been there for about 15 years. And on the coffee mug, it says, just remember, one day soon, you'll be dead. It's one of those like meme cards graphics. Just remember, one day soon, you'll be dead. And the message of that meme and that coffee mug is to not concern yourself so much with stuff that maybe agitates you on a day-to-day, small stuff. Don't sweat the small stuff, all that crap. And anytime something like that comes up, where somebody calls a meeting during a holiday week for no reason whatsoever, where somebody in the company clicks reply all on a company-wide email, why does that still happen in the year of our Lord 2025? Why does that still occur? When small stuff like that happens, when HR sends us an email that says, oh, we have another hour-long video you have to watch and you have to review the alcohol policy because somebody screwed up at a live remote. Not me. Rumors there, but not me. When those things happen, we often say, get the mug, because that's just a little thing between all of us that says, okay, yeah, this is annoying, and this has maybe thrown a wrench into my day, but just remember, one day soon we'll all be dead. And that's kind of how I feel after the last 6 days of Packer football. What did we do to deserve the last 6 days of Packer football? Before we get into that, I do want to address Bears fans, if we have any that listen. I know we probably have a handful that listen. And here's what I want to do. I'm going to be magnanimous. Is that the word? I think it is. I'm going to try my best to be magnanimous. Congratulations to the Bears fans out there, because I knew as I was doom scrolling Twitter last night, going through all the different Packer accounts I follow and all the different live stream post games, because I was consuming post-game Packer Bear content, and because we have used Bears fan tears on this podcast many times, our buddy M-Bone, we've played that audio many times. I knew just by scrolling through Twitter that I was going to stumble upon celebratory Bears fan videos. And as annoying as they were, I had a moment last night where I thought, you know what? Let them have fun. Let them be. Because as we've gone over in this rivalry, if you are a Bears fan that's my age or younger, or maybe even a little bit older, all you basically know in your life in this Packer-Bear rivalry is getting your brains beaten by the Packers. Yeah, there were a couple of seasons in there, maybe, like we talked about on the last podcast, where the Bears made that Super Bowl run in 2006. I think they swept the Packers that year. There have been little bursts of joy over the last 30-plus years, but more often than not, they had the graphic last night. Matt LaFleur is something like, now he's 12-2, I think, but he was 12-1. Matt LaFleur going into last night was 12-1 in 13 games against the Bears. The Packers had won something like 12 or 14 of the last 16 games. Favre dominated them. Rodgers dominated them. I own you, I still own you. Love's record, I think, going into last night was 5-1 in Bears games, with the one loss being last year where he got hurt and Malik Willis had to come into the regular season finale in a game that meant nothing to the Packers, and the Bears were celebrating then because that's how down they've been in this rivalry. So I just want to say to them, enjoy it, because a rational person might say, well, we beat a backup quarterback and we need a lot of random things to go our way. And, did we really play the best? We got outplayed for 98% of the game, but 2% of the game things broke our way and made a couple of plays. A rational person may look at that game. A rational Bears fan may look at that game and decide all of that and say, I don't know how much we should be celebrating. Their quarterback left the game. Micah Parsons, arguably their best player, out for the year 6 days ago. There's a lot of stuff going on there. We were at home. We're in first place, and they would take it in stride. But given what has happened in this rivalry over the course of the last 30 years, I do not begrudge Bears fans a bit for celebrating the way they did last night. They have had their brains bashed in for 3 decades. It's the weekend before Christmas. Everybody's in a celebratory mood anyway. I will say this about Soldier Field, if they ever move to Gary, Indiana. I will say this. That place was electric most of the night, and especially in that first quarter on that opening Packer drive. You could just hear it. The place was absolutely humming. So I do feel not good for them, but I will say enjoy. Enjoy that win, because honestly, that's their Randall Cobb in the 2013 de facto NFC North championship game. That's what that is. And as Packer fans, we're probably going to have to hear about that game a lot over the course of the next 35 to 40 years. It does not change the fact that the Packers won that game in 2013 to win the division. It does not change the fact that the Packers won the only NFC championship game matchup in Chicago these two teams have ever played, with the right to go to the Super Bowl on the line. We still have all of that. We've got the decades of dominance, but that is their Randall Cobb. coming back the way they did, dead to rights, down by 10 with 3 minutes left. All the little things that had to break their way. The win probability, I think I saw on Next Gen Stats, was somewhere around 0.5% with 3 minutes to go, and the Packers were still up by 10, 16-6. I mean, 0.5% chance to win. And they did it. And the Packers had to give it to them with a botched onside kick again. But Caleb Williams, for as bad as he was for the majority of that game, threw 2 great passes, one that tied the game and one that won the game. And for them, that Caleb Williams to DJ Moore, the game winner, whatever it was, the 50-yard game winner, that is there. He's got Randall Cobb. And there is a small part of me, knowing the rivalry the way that I do, with where I am in my age in life at 41 years old and how I've gotten to enjoy 90% of these games over my lifetime, there is a small part of me that says, okay, we're probably due a little bit for something like that. And those fans have just had this terrible, decades-long run. Let them enjoy this. Even though a rational person would say, backup quarterback, a million things had to break their way, Micah Parsons out for the year, how much should we be celebrating? Let them enjoy it. They're throwing parades. I saw some Bears fans, M-Bone, I think, was almost in tears at the end of the minute-long video he posted last night. I saw legitimate tears streaming down the cheeks, the chubby cheeks of Bears fans at bars all over Chicago because of the way that game concluded, and they kind of rose from the dead there with a 0.5% chance to win, and they got it done. So even though we could make all the excuses and say all of the reasons that things went wrong for the Packers last night, I will simply say, enjoy that moment, because they haven't had many of them. And I did. I mean, there were legitimate tears on Twitter last night. And I thought, you know what? Fine. Let them have it. Let them have this. Can't you just let me have this? Let them have this. Now, I do want to talk about the fact that this game was the Spider-Man meme of the 2014 NFC Championship game. I'm pretty sure every Packer fan realized that as soon as the onside kick was botched, and then especially with the way the game ended in overtime on that type of a walk-off catch in the end zone. And a lot like the NFC Championship game in 2014, if you go back to how many plays, that's what we always say about that game. If you went back and this changed or that changed, there were probably 14 plays or 15 plays in the NFC Championship game in 2014 where if one of them goes right, you don't need all of them. You don't even need 2 of them. If one of them goes right, you win that game. And by the time the game ended last night, we were in the exact same situation where there were some things I forgot they even happened because of all the things that happened leading up to and immediately after the botched onside kick. Josh Jacobs, a fumble inside the 5-yard line where at minimum you're looking at a field goal. That could have changed the game. Another one that I totally forgot about. The rookie defensive tackle Warren Brinson. I think it was still 16-6. Packers were up by 10. It was 3rd and 20, and that's where it looked like Brinson had sacked Caleb Williams, and it was going to be 4th and a mile. Well, not 4th and 26. Hopefully not that, because, my God, could you imagine if the 2003 divisional round game against the Eagles somehow collaborated with the 2014 NFC Championship game? What kind of amalgamation nightmare that would have been. It was a nightmare as it was. Imagine if that would have played into it. But that, too, so much happened, I forgot about that, where if he gets the clean sack there and he doesn't grab Caleb Williams' face mask that gives the Bears an automatic first down and puts them at the Packer 35-yard line, they were at midfield with probably a 4th and 30 with 3 minutes to go down by 10. And if the Packers get a stop on 4th and 30, the game is over there too. So a lot like that NFC Championship game in 2014, there are a ton of plays you can go back and look at and say, if this would have gone differently, if that would have gone differently, if we make a better play call here, if somebody holds onto the ball there, if we recover an onside kick. And much like that game, even with all of those plays, that if they go your way, you probably win. What does it all come down to in your brain? It still just comes down to Bostic in 2014 botching the onside kick and Romeo Doubs last night botching the onside kick. But that throw, I saw somebody actually put, some absolute sadist on Packer Twitter, put together a top and bottom video of 3, I would say, plays of this game last night that pretty much mirrored 3 plays last night. The botched onside kick, I think the 4th and 4 touchdown pass from Caleb Williams last night, that guy was wide open in the end zone. That looked exactly like the game-tying 2-point conversion, the 2014 NFC Championship game. And then the pass from Russell Wilson to, I forget who the receiver was, Ingram maybe for the Seahawks at that time. Overtime, a 40-yard, over-the-shoulder, perfectly placed bomb. Tramon Williams in 2014 was trailing on the play and had maybe a chance to get a fingernail on it. Keyshawn Nixon, same deal last night. The plays could not look more identical. So we did throw that into the universe on the last podcast. I'm not going to take total blame for what happened last night, but I can't help but think of the fact that we had about a 5-minute conversation about that coming out of the Denver game on the Monday podcast last week, and I said, it was bad, and you blew a lead, and you had all these injuries, but it's not the same as the 2014 NFC Championship game because of the stakes, because of the game script, and then we literally relived it last night where you had that game in the bag and made just a bunch of mistakes, a dozen individual mistakes that all had to break the Bears' way for them to win, and it did. But that is what we talked about on the Monday podcast last week. That is exactly the way it played out in 2014. We got to relive it 11 years later in a late December game. And when you just look at the totality of the last 6 days, I honestly, and this is maybe recency bias, when I think of back-to-back regular season losses, and not just losing, but blowing leads the way they did, the significant injuries you sustained in those 2 games, and there weren't a lot of injuries last night. That's more so a Denver game. But when I think back to my Packer life, when I became cognizant of football, when I was born in 1984, but I was really born in 1991, when I realized what the Packers were, what the NFL was, who Brett Favre was. And I think about all those years, it's hard to remember back-to-back games in the span of 6 days. And this hasn't even been a week. I'm recording this at 1 o'clock on Sunday. We hadn't even a week ago. We're still 2 hours away from kickoff, 2.5 hours away from kickoff in the Denver game. So this all happened in less than 7 days. But when I think back to all of my years of watching Packer football, when you figure where the Packers were in the standings before last week, 9-3-1, threatening for a division title, threatening for a 1 seed, and where they are 6 days later, blowing 2 games in epic fashion against Chicago. Not as epic of a blown game against Denver, but still a game you were up by 9 with the ball in the third quarter on the road. And you think of all the injuries, the significant injuries to key players in that game against Denver, and you add that into it. It's hard to think of back-to-back regular season losses that hurt as much as these back-to-back losses does. The only one that I can remember, and this will be for a specific fan with a good memory, the only thing I can remember is during the 96 Super Bowl year, and maybe this, if that's the comparison we're drawing up here, maybe that portends well. Maybe this team can still make a run. But if you remember that year, the championship year in 96, and the Packers went into it with all of the expectations, the cover of Sports Illustrated, it was their year to rise to the top. They've been knocking on the door. They were going to break down the door and finally win a title. And that's how we felt all year. And they won 8 of their first 9 games that year. They went 8-1 in their first 9 games. That's what the record would be if you win 8 of your first 9. Just to clear the math up. And then they sustained just a ton of wide receiver injuries. Early in the year, they lost Robert Brooks to the torn ACL. Antonio Freeman broke his arm. And on down the line it went, to the point where now they were down to Don Beebe. That's the year I got a Don Beebe Christmas jersey, because Beebe kind of stepped up in the absence of everybody and had some big games. But you were down to Desmond Howard as a wide receiver, not just a returner. You were down to Terry Mickens. Remember that guy? Now that's a name. You either know it or you don't know it. You were down to Terry Mickens and Don Beebe and Derek Mays, maybe, I think, was a rookie wide receiver that year from Notre Dame. And you had a lot of injuries to big players. Reggie wasn't hurt the way Parsons is, and you still had Favre, and Jordan Love left last night's game, and we hope this is just a 1-week thing, but with concussions, you never know. He might miss another game. He might miss multiple games. We just have to figure out, sometimes you're past the concussion protocol in a day, and sometimes it takes 10 weeks. So you didn't have those 2 guys out in 96, but a lot of injuries that year. And then, remember, they went on the road to Kansas City, and that was thought to be a Super Bowl contending team. In fact, if memory serves me, I believe the cover of SI that year was the Packers with Brooks and Favre and White facing the Chiefs with Steve Bono and Neil Smith and Marcus Allen, maybe. But those were thought to be the 2 best teams in each conference. So the Packers went into Kansas City with all of that behind it. They lost that game in dramatic fashion. Then they went to Dallas, their house of horrors, at Texas Stadium, a place they could never win a game. And they lost that game on Monday Night Football. I'm pretty sure that was the game where Chris Boniel hit like 7 field goals. The Packers lost 21-7, but it wasn't 3 touchdowns. It was 7 Chris Boniel field goals. And I'm almost certain at the end of that game, that was some kind of a record at the time. It may still be for the most field goals made in a game. And they kicked it just for the record because the game had been decided. It was seconds left, and the Cowboys were up 18-7. And I believe they wanted to kick that last field goal just to set the record for Bonial. And you know who didn't take that well? Reggie White. And remember, Reggie White storming across the field, pointing at Chris Bonial, who I think had to shit his pants just about when you've got Reggie White coming in at him. By the way, there's going to be some swearing on this podcast given the context of last night, so we'll make a donation to St. Jude with every swear jar, with every swear jar drop we have here. But remember that? And Reggie tried to get into it then with a bunch of Cowboy players and coaches. It was a whole kerfuffle at the end of that game. And they went from 8-1 to 8-3. They lost two of their biggest games of the year, had a ton of injuries, and it did sort of feel like things were spiraling. And then it was the following week in St. Louis when the Rams were still in St. Louis, and they played a horrific first half. And the Rams were a bad team at that year and just a bad team overall in that era until the late 90s. And they were down in the first half in that game, and then degenerate Packer fans will remember Doug Evans early in the second half of that game in St. Louis when they were down, and you thought, oh my God, they're going to lose 3 games in a row? They're going to lose to the Rams? Doug Evans had a pick 6 in that game early in the second half. It gave the Packers a lead. They rolled in that game. Then after that play, got it back together, didn't lose a game the rest of the regular season, and didn't lose a game in the playoffs and won a championship. But when I think back to 2 regular season losses, and they're both on the road, like those were at Kansas City, at Dallas, this was at Denver, at Chicago, that's the only thing I can come up with that is comparative in any way to what we've experienced as fans in the last 6 days. When you factor in a 23-14 third quarter lead in Denver with the ball, you blow that. Micah Parsons goes down for the year. All the players that left the game and did not return against Denver last week, 6 days ago. And then you go to Chicago. Your starting quarterback then leaves that game with a concussion. It still looks like you're going to win that game. And, man, one of the things I'm so upset about is that I had so many things in the chamber. I had so many memes. I had the Clay Matthews from the draft this year. The Bears still suck. I had the Ben Johnson. It feels really good to beat Matt LaFleur twice a year. I had so much stuff I was ready to put on the Green and Gold Fan Zone page and to chirp Bears fans. On my Facebook page, I was going to say, oh, you couldn't even beat us with a backup quarterback. You're never going to beat us. And the fact that I had to holster all that also made me upset last night. But when I think of what has gone down now in the last 6 days, that's the only comparison I could come up with is the mid to late-ish season, those back-to-back losses in KC and in Dallas in the Super Bowl year of 1996. Now, I want to talk about specific coaches and players, and I guess we can run through the game if you really want to. This was a game where another frustrating part was, and this, I guess, goes back to the 2014 game, 98% of the game was great. That's what's so maddening about it. And when you think of specific players, Romeo Doubs had a great game before he botched the onside kick. 98% of the game, Doubs was great. 2% he wasn't. It cost him the game. The Jeff Hafley defense without Micah Parsons. How is this defense going to look without Micah Parsons? And while it struggled in some elements, they didn't give up a damn point. Ding. They didn't give up a point in the first half. And up until that final drive, they had only given up, 6 points or 9 points, I guess, all night. 3 field goals. That's it. How could they possibly still be a good defense without Micah Parsons? And remember, we talked about on Friday. Remember, without Micah Parsons, this was a top 5 defense last year. They just have to get back to that and adapt back to what they were last year. And it kind of looked like they had. Were great for 98% of the game. And then the last 2% after the botched onside kick couldn't stop them on that 4th and 4. They tied the game, couldn't stop them once they got the ball in overtime. Malik Willis comes into the game last night. Does what he has done as the backup in Green Bay. He was excellent. And then 98% excellent. And then 2%. He botched that handoff on 4th and 1 when they were driving on the first drive of overtime. You can maybe take issue with the snap from Sean Ryan. Malik in the postgame said it was on him. He changed the cadence for whatever reason at the line of scrimmage. And Malik said that's what screwed up Sean Ryan and ultimately led to the botch on the handoff. Or on the exchange. So that leads to a fumble, turnover on downs. You don't get anything on the opening drive of overtime. 98% Malik was good, and then 2%, that happens at the end of it. And all of those 2% were crucial to allowing the Bears back into the game. Now I want to talk about Matt LaFleur, and I just want to reiterate something that we talked about. I don't even know when it was. Was it after the Carolina game or the Philly game or both of those games? And then they kind of got on a run after that, won 4 games in a row until the Denver game and now this game. And what did we say after the Carolina game, close loss there, Philly game, close loss there? I said, I do not want Matt LaFleur fired. I don't even know what his career record is. It's awesome. It's a great record. He has like a 670 winning percentage, okay? And I know we've been over that. But one thing we've also been over with Matt LaFleur is that in close games against good teams, which I think Chicago is, right? The record is 11-4. In close games against good teams over his 7-year tenure as the head coach of this team, and especially in the playoffs, in close games against really good teams, it feels like the Packers, more often than not, make the small mistakes. The fumble on the snap, Malik Willis. Couple of penalties on special teams. Unable to field an onside kick. All of the little stuff and the mental stuff. Josh Jacobs with the fumble. I realize Matt LaFleur, and that's always the counter argument. Well, Matt LaFleur is not the one out there not able to handle the onside kick, and Matt LaFleur is not the guy fumbling inside the 5-yard line like Josh Jacobs did, and Matt LaFleur is not the guy unable to do a center quarterback exchange between Ryan and Malik Willis on that drive in overtime. But at some point, and we're going to talk about this with Rich Bisacci in a second, there's a famous sign, if you read American history at all, Harry Truman, the S stood for nothing, Harry S. Truman, had on his desk as president, the buck stops here. And that doesn't mean that everything that happened wrong in America doesn't mean that Harry Truman was responsible directly for all of it, but he's the guy. He's the lead guy, and even though I may not be directly related to what went wrong, the buck stops here. So, yes, at some point, you can look at this and say, LaFleur's not the one on the field making the mistakes, and he's putting them in the positions and whatever, but this has been a theme over his 7 years of being a coach. 7 years, by the way, with a ton of wins, but also 7 years where in close games against good teams, they don't do the small stuff consistently enough. I think Matt LaFleur, if he stays the head coach of this team, and I think he will, and again, I'm not calling for his job. I am simply pointing out something we've already pointed out before, that a lot of people have pointed out when they are making an argument that maybe this team should move on from Matt LaFleur and find somebody else. I do not want that. Matt LaFleur, I am fine with him being the head coach next year and the year after that, and I think we'll win 10, 11, 12 games, 9, 10, 11, 12 games, all of those years, and probably make the playoffs and compete for division titles, but it is worth having that conversation of we are in year 7 now with Matt LaFleur, and you go back to the playoff games at the end of the Rodgers era, you go back to the divisional round game against the Niners when it looked like the Packers were the hottest team in football, and they blew the doors off of Dallas, and he deserves credit for that. But then the small stuff in that Niner game in the divisional round, some of the stuff last year, some of the stuff this year in big games against close teams, they just make the little mistakes. They turn the ball over at a bad time. They have to burn timeouts at a bad time. They make stupid decisions with challenges like he did in Denver last week. The little stuff they do not seem to have tied up. The T's aren't crossed and the I's aren't dotted. Almost said the I's aren't crossed and the T's aren't dotted because that's where my headspace is right now. It's mush. It's mashed potatoes. There's all sorts of Christmas cookie sugar binding up the neurons in my brain, so I'm unable to fire off the way I want to. But this has been a theme, and we talked about it coming out of the Carolina-Philly game, and I just want to talk about it again right now because it is irritating. I don't think that he's a bad head coach. I think if he's the head coach for the next 10 years, we will see a lot of wins over the next 10 years. Will we win a Super Bowl? Will they be able to do the small stuff to go on a run? I guess that's what concerns me about the LaFleur era in a macro sense. Because when you get to the playoffs, you're not playing bad teams in the playoffs. So when consistently over 7 years, you don't do the small stuff, you don't have the loose ends tied up in the close games against good teams, that's all playoff games are. You don't have games against the whatever. I know I'm going to say the Panthers, even though they lost the Panthers, but whatever. You don't have games against the Falcons in the playoffs or last place teams, whatever they are in the playoffs that you can feast on and you can win those games just by being the better team, by being the more talented team. This team now, in all likelihood, and the division's not dead, but in all likelihood, they're going to be the 7 seed come playoff time, hopefully. And that means you're going to have to go on the road like they did in 2010. You're going to have to go on the road and win 3 road games against really good teams and then go to the Super Bowl and win a game against a really good team. And I just don't know, given what we've seen in the LaFleur era in close games against good teams, are they going to be able to have all the loose ends tied up, to do all the small stuff that will be required of them 3 weeks in a row, 4 weeks in a row? 1 week, I can see it. You know, I think in a one-off, They can do all the small stuff and get that job done, but can you do it the next week and the week after that and the week after that? And I just don't think we've seen that consistency. Again, I do not want Matt LaFleur fired. I just want it pointed out, and I want the conversation in the ether that this has been a problem over 7 years. And when you start talking about winning titles, and that means you have to win 3 playoff games, I guess 2, at minimum 2 games if you're the 1 seed, 2 games to get there and 1 game in the Super Bowl. And now with where you're at, you're going to have to win 4 games in a row against really good teams, championship caliber teams. Can they do the small stuff? Avoid the penalties, avoid the turnovers, the red zone turnovers in particular, the missed field goals, the bad challenges, the burn timeouts when you didn't need to burn a timeout as the play clock's going down. Can they do that all well for 3 games in a row, 4 games in a row against good teams? I don't know that we can say that confidently. I can say confidently they will win a bunch of regular season games and maybe win a division title and make the playoffs as a wild card, but I'm not sure we're at the point now at the end of year 7 and next year probably being year 8 where we can say that they can go and win a title because they just don't do it well enough consistently. Right now, that can change. It can change. It hasn't in 7 years, and that's a long time. Most people go to college for 7 years and become a doctor. But we just haven't seen it, and I just want that conversation to be continually out there. Now, let's talk about Rich Bisaccia. This is going to be real easy. Rich Bisaccia has to be fired. And I will say this about last night. The onside kick is 1,000% on Romeo Doubs. Much like it was, was it Menenga was the special teams coordinator, or was it Zook? Remember when Ron Zook was their special teams coordinator? Or Slocum? I think maybe it was Slocum. They say, when you go back to the 2014 title game and the Bostic botch on the onside kick, every person, and Bostic himself has said this, they all say before they took the field for that onside kick, specifically they were told by the coaches, do not touch the ball. Let Jordy Nelson be the only player that touches the ball. And if you've got it set up correctly, and those are your last messages to all the players, I don't know what you do as a coach when 20 seconds later, after being specifically told, do not touch the ball, Bostic touches the ball, and that's what leads to the chaos that comes after it, and you turn it over. All you can do as a coach is put the players in a position and tell them what to do or what not to do. That's all you can do. And I will say specifically last night, the blocking was fine on the onside kick. The ball was rolling directly to Romeo Doubs. And especially in this era of the onside kick where, what did they say, 4 of 50 or 4 of 51 had been recovered. Back in the 2014 title game, it still wasn't a play that was converted 20% or even 15 or 10% of the time. But given the new rules where you have to declare whether or not you're doing an onside kick prior to doing it, and everybody knows what's coming and you can set it up the way you want to, and I think you might even have to declare a side. So for those reasons, onside kick recovery rate is way lower than it was in 2014. But everybody was in the right spot, and the blocking was good, and the ball was rolling directly to Romeo Doubs like he was Joey Ortiz at shortstop, and he just booted it. And when you watch the replay, I remember even thinking in real time, as the ball is rolling to him, he's kind of backing up on it. You know, that's kind of a baseball rule where attack the ball, go to the ball. Take it from me, a podcaster. But that is, even I remember that even in Little League. That was always the thing. If you were playing on the infield, don't back up and wait for the ball to get to you. You make a play on the ball. And when you watch that replay, for some reason, I don't know if he didn't like the hop it was taking or it was an in-between hop, something made him uncomfortable. And he backed up on it, and that's kind of what led to him fumbling around with it. So specifically on that play last night, I don't know what more you can do as Rich Bisaccia. The guys were in the right spot, the blocking was all good, and the ball was rolling directly to the guy that they wanted to catch it because he is the Jordy Nelson, not just wearing number 87, but in the onside recovery kick scheme, Romeo Doubs last night literally plays the role of Jordy Nelson. That's who they want the ball to go to. There were no Brandon Bostics tipping it or going rogue and making stupid boneheaded plays. It was going exactly the way they wanted to, and Doubs muffed it. And Doubs said post-game, shit, I lost it. I shit the bed, I think he said was his quote, which I guess I appreciate. A lot of Packer players did that last night. But I don't know what else you can do. But here's the thing. This is a Truman. This is the buck stops here situation. There have been so many reasons to fire Rich Bisaccia. This is like the cherry on top, even though I don't know that I blame him 100% or even 50% for the way that onside kick went last night, because it does look like it was schemed up exactly the way they wanted to, and they just didn't execute. But I saw a tweet. Spencer Michaelis had this last night on Twitter. When you go back to some of the losses this year, they lost to Cleveland by 3 points, blocked field goal. They lost to the Panthers by 3 points, missed 42-yard chip shot. They tie the Cowboys, a blocked extra point return for a 2-point conversion that leads to a 40-40 tie. And the Bears overtime loss last night, you don't recover an onside kick. Rich Bisaccia, as you may or may not know, if you listen to this podcast, is the highest paid special teams coach in the league. The highest paid. This is year 3 now? 23, right? 22? No, this might be year 4. Because 21 was Mo Drayton, and that was the year. This is another criticism of LaFleur. He is too loyal to his guys. We said all year in 2021, special teams are going to cost you. Special teams are going to cost you. Special teams are going to cost you. And they get the number 1 seed, and in the first playoff game, a divisional round game against San Francisco, they've got a block kick of Mason Crosby, a block punt return for a touchdown in a game you lost by 3 goddamn points. Put it in the swear jar. And all year we said, you've got to move on from this guy. This is going to cost you in a big game. And lo and behold, it cost you in a divisional round playoff game at home as the 1 seed in a year where Aaron Rodgers won the MVP. And I feel like we're saying the same stuff now about Rich Bisaccia. This is year 4. They promoted him. Not only has he not been fired, he got promoted. He failed upwards. He got promoted to assistant head coach, which is kind of, I think, what he was doing with the Raiders, before he came to Green Bay, where he was the assistant head coach and the special teams coach. Then they fired, I forget the head coach they fired, it was McDaniels, and then he became the head coach, but they didn't want to keep him as the head coach, and then he comes to Green Bay. If it is 4 years, I think they were middle of the pack year 1, which I did take as an improvement, because they had been dead last, so middle of the pack was like, okay, breath of fresh air. I guess that's, at least we're a normal special teams team now. But then every subsequent year, it's gotten worse. They were near dead last, I think, the last 2 years. The last 2 years. Not this, and this year they're almost dead last again. The last 2 years, so this is 2025, so 24 and 23, either last or second to last in terms of total special team ranking. And they're there again this year, and as the list we just went over, it has cost them in close games all year. So while I don't necessarily blame Rich Bisaccia in a one-off last night on the botched onside kick recovery, the buck stops with him, and this is the culmination of so many failings over the last 2 or 3 years, this year specifically. The Rams on Thursday, they had a couple of special teams gaffes. Going into that game, remember Thursday Night Football, Rams went in 11-3, Seahawks 11-3, one of the premier games of the year in the NFL. Seahawks win a thriller in overtime, 38-37. It drops the Rams from the 1 seed, and special teams errors in that game were a big part of them losing that game. You know what Sean McVay did on Friday morning? Fired a special teams coach. Firing your special teams coach is the one coordinator position, I feel like, that you can fire on the fly, bring somebody else in, promote somebody else on the staff with maybe a little bit of a different perspective. You're not doing all sorts of crazy different stuff as the special teams coordinator. You just need to be normal. If you fired a defensive coordinator in the middle of the year and brought somebody new with a new scheme, if you fired an offensive coordinator in the middle of the year and brought in somebody with a new scheme, that is much more difficult to install after you've been spending your entire training camp in July and August in the preseason, and you're in week 7 or 8 or 9 or whenever you make the firing. That is much more difficult to do on the move. I don't think that's the case for a special teams coordinator. You could fire Rich Bisaccia this morning, hire somebody new, and then hopefully it gets better, but I think that new person could take over today, and I think we would be fine, moving forward. How could it get any worse, I guess? But that is of the coordinator positions, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, special teams coordinator. To me, that is the one that you can do in the middle of the year, replace it on the fly, and you're probably going to get a little bit better. You might get a boost, but you're not implementing a whole new offensive or defensive scheme. You're not shifting from a 3-4 defense to a 4-3 defense, and you've got the wrong personnel. Special teams are special teams. And the Rams had a bunch of problems in that game, in a big game they lost on the road, and Sean McVay fired him on Friday morning, and they installed a new guy on Friday afternoon. The Packers have to do the same thing because it's just too much. It's too much shit wall to wall over the last 3 years, and especially this year. Again, maybe not last night because everything looked like it was put correctly on the field other than the execution of the play. But this is a Truman. The buck stops with him, and it's not like this has been the number one special teams unit or a top 5 unit or a top 10 unit the last 3 or 4 years, and they're just making errors this year. They've been bad for several years and are still bad. And as we just went over with the losses this year, it is costing you games, and it was another, what was the phrase? The Merkel boner? That's for the baseball historians out there. That's an early 20th century big baseball error in the World Series by a guy named Fred Merkel. They called it the Merkel boner. And sadly, the man was depressed the rest of his life because that phrase became associated with him everywhere he went. It was the Dobbs boner last night. And I don't know that is specifically a Rich Bisaccia era, but there's just been too much bad stuff over the last 2 or 3 years for a guy getting paid the amount he is to not move on from him. You must fire Rich Bisaccia. They're not going to do it, but you have to. I want that out there too. Now let's talk about Jordan Love, Malik Willis. First of all, Jordan Love got headhunted last night. That's clear to me. There is Dennis Allen as defensive coordinator of the Bears. Do you know who was the defensive coordinator of the number one, I think he was the 1B guy behind Greg Williams, was it? On the Bounty Gates New Orleans Saints team with Sean Payton as the head coach. I think Greg Williams is the defensive coordinator. And eventually there was the investigation that they were headhunting Brett Favre in the NFC Championship game in 2009. They were specifically trying to injure players or target injured body parts. Dennis Allen was on that staff. I might be being a tad dramatic, but they had the same guy for the Bears got a personal foul for driving his full body weight on top of Jordan Love early in the game. So that was already a roughing the passer. And then he leads with his head. Now, Bears fans are going to tell you that, Jordan Love lowered his head, and that's why he got hit head-to-head and got the concussion. If you look at the replay, Jordan Love, he lowers his head 8 degrees, and if he doesn't do that, they're making it sound like Bears fans, which I almost appreciate the spin zone. Bears fans are making it sound like Jordan Love intentionally got himself in a position to get helmet-to-helmet hit, get a concussion, and get a personal foul on the Bears. It's insane, the spin zone they're putting on it. That Bear defensive player led with his helmet. So even if Jordan Love moves his head, you don't lead as a tackler anymore, or in the last 10 years, you don't lead with your head like it's a spear, like it's 1985, and you're crushing a wide receiver helmet to helmet over the middle. Those days are gone. Now, if you want to bemoan that, if you want to say, and some Bears fans I saw said that, the league's soft now, they don't let guys hit, whatever. If you want to bemoan what the NFL has become in the past 20 years or 15 years with the emphasis on concussions and defensive players, you can't lead with your helmet, you can't put your body weight on a guy, you can't do this, you can't do that. If you want to be upset about the way the game has changed, that's a different conversation for a different day. The rule is you cannot lead with your helmet like you're a heat-seeking missile, and that's exactly what he did. And you knew Jordan Love was done the second he went down. I almost think on the replay, he had one of those, what does Tua always end up doing? Because he's had so many concussions. What do they call it when your hands kind of go up involuntarily when you suffer a brain trauma? I think it's called the fencing response. You almost see that with Love when he went down. And he wasn't moving initially, and he went off under his own power. That was good to see. He was able to jog on his own to the Blue Medical tent and walk off to the trainer's room. But you kind of knew in that moment his night was going to be done. It would have been a miracle. This wasn't Aaron Rodgers going down with his knee injury. It's my knee. And you could just load him up with Percocet and put him back out there. That's not how this works. So you kind of knew his night was done. But I don't think it's a coincidence that a guy that was an assistant defensive coach on the Bounty Gate team, and then it's the same Bears guy with the first roughing the passer, puts his full body weight on him, leads with his helmet the next time he has a shot at him. So Love goes down with the concussion. Enter Malik Willis. And like we said 20 minutes ago, Malik played a hell of a game. And I have to be honest with you. Can I be honest? Can we be in the trust tree for a second? You know on this podcast how much I've been having these arguments, these fake arguments with imaginary people in the room, these arguments of Jordan Love haters. It is maybe 15% to 20% of the fan base that does not believe in Jordan Love, but they are very loud every time Jordan Love makes a mistake, which hasn't happened. The way those fans position it, you'd think Love has 20 touchdowns and 17 receptions this year, 23 touchdowns, 6 picks. But every time he makes a mistake, every time he turns the ball over, every time a pass is a little outside or a little inside or whatever, they always put it in a highlighter, put it in bold font, italics, whatever the font would be. I forget what's the font that gave you like extra, like Bookman old style. That always gave you an extra half a page on a midterm paper, by the way. Go from Times New Roman to Bookman Old Style. They don't look that different, but they are a little bigger, and it gives you an extra half page. I use that a lot in college. But any little mistake he makes gets blown to high heaven because that group of fans thinks that Jordan Love is not good. They don't think he should be the franchise quarterback, and on it went. So when Malik Willis came in, we know the history of Malik Willis. He made 2 starts last year. He won them both. He came in the Jacksonville game, won that. He did come in the Bear game last year, the regular season finale, and did not play well in that game, and they lost that game. That seems to kind of get forgotten about because that game didn't mean anything, and that's fine. So Malik comes in, and I knew immediately, as soon as he came in, what was it? Was it still 3-0? I think it was still 3-0 at the time when he came in, second quarter. And I'm thinking, God, I want to see this team beat this team so bad for so many reasons, because of the rivalry, because Bears fans are getting chippy because they're having a pretty good year, because it helps the Packer playoff picture, because it helps them get in position to win a division title. But there was a little part of me, because of how much I have to hear on our text line, on the emails, about how Jordan Love isn't the guy from that very vocal, very small part of the fan base. There's a part of my brain that knew if Malik Willis comes into this game and he throws 3 touchdowns and they win 24-10, I'm going to be happy they won, but I know what's going to happen then. I'm going to have to get back into the Jordan Love coal mines. They're going to have to lower me down into the coal mines, and I'm going to have to do some of my best spin zone work if he goes in and he lights this Bears defense up and they win this game. As excited as I will be to celebrate a victory Sunday, and as excited as I will be to see the Bears lose again, I knew that was going to be a part of what would come out of it if the Packers won. So there was just a little part of me that wanted the Packers to win, but Malik not to play that well. It's a small part of me. But Malik came in, and he does what he has done as the backup of this team. Honest to God, when you look back at the moves Goody has made as the GM for the Packers, I think signing the Smith brothers, that was a masterstroke for a couple of years. Obviously, the trade for Micah Parsons. He's had some hits in the draft. He's had some misses, whatever. One of the shrewdest moves that Goody has made in his tenure as GM was before last year started, a week before the regular season, trading a 7th-round pick for Malik Willis. Here's what I want to say about Malik Willis. He's good. Malik Willis is good. We don't have to say that, and then in the next breath say that Jordan Love should not be the franchise quarterback. We don't have to. Believe me, we don't have to. All we have to say is Malik Willis is good. Period. Full stop. That's the sentence. Until overtime when he fumbled that 4th down. Now, I wasn't happy about that. Now, you might logically think, well, were you happy he fumbled the ball on 4th and 1 then? Were you happy Malik Willis made a critical mistake in a big moment in overtime? No, I was not. No, I was not. Malik Willis is good. The Packers have 2 good quarterbacks. That's a good thing. We don't have to have a debate every time one plays well or the other doesn't play well or somebody comes in. They have 2 good quarterbacks. Malik Willis is a good quarterback. Malik Willis is, I think, the best backup quarterback in the NFL. And Malik Willis, he's in the final year of his contract. We talked about that heading into the year. Malik Willis is going to get a chance somewhere next year with a lot of money to be the center of an offense and to be a starting quarterback in the NFL. He's going to get that. It's not going to happen in Green Bay, unfortunately. I wish we could hang on to him as the backup quarterback for the rest of his tenure. I wish you could make some kind of Jordan Love, Malik Willis symbiotic contract where for as long as Love is the starting quarterback, Malik is his backup, so we know we have somebody we trust that can win games as the backup quarterback. Malik Willis is a good quarterback, and Malik Willis does give you this. Here's another thing I'll say. Can I say something? Can I finally talk? I say that a lot on the morning show and on this pod. I'm the only one talking. Can I say something finally? So Malik Willis blows Jordan Love out of the water when it comes to recognizing the pocket crumbling, getting out of there, and using his legs. And I do think that's a part of why when Willis comes into games that Love started and Love goes down, I do think that's a part of why Willis looks so good and defenses just don't know what to do with him because they're game planning for Jordan Love. They're spending all week game planning for Love and what Love can do, what his strengths are. He has them. He does have them. What his strengths are, what his weaknesses are, what they're trying to exploit. And then you bring in Willis, and he adds this running dynamic where they're going run options, and he's breaking to the outside. When the pocket collapses, he has a much better brain for, I need to get out of here. He is under control of his body. I know we've talked about with Jordan Love, when he scrambles, his limbs are flying everywhere. He looks like a newborn baby calf trying to walk for the first time sometimes. That is not a problem with Malik Willis. I trust him implicitly when he decides to get out of the pocket, and he made a lot of Mike Vick-esque runs last night where it looked like he was dead to rights. He makes a little juke step inside, speeds around the outside. He's got better speed. He's got better running ability, and he adds that different characteristic to this offense that Jordan Love does not have. So he is better at that. Here's where I'm at with these 2 guys who are both good quarterbacks. I believe if everything is equal around them, if everybody's healthy, best case scenario for both quarterbacks, everybody's healthy, Watson's healthy, Tucker Kraft is healthy, Micah Parsons is healthy playing defense, I believe that in those circumstances, Jordan Love is the type of quarterback with a high ceiling that can lead you to a 12-win year, a 13-win year, a playoff run, and he'll be in the running for MVP, which he has been. He has been as high as the third best odds to win the MVP. I think now he's 6th or 7th, and the injury last night will not help that. But that's what I believe Jordan Love's ceiling to be. If everything's perfect around him, everybody's healthy around him, he can lead a team to a 12-5 year, a 13-4 year, maybe a 1 seed, a division title, and he will be in the MVP conversation. If everything is the same around Malik Willis, I believe Malik Willis is a 9-win quarterback or a 10-win quarterback. I believe he can lead this team to being 9-8 or 10-7 and being a wild card team or maybe being in the running for a division title late in the year. That's good. That is a good thing. I do believe that Love's ceiling still is higher than Willis's ceiling. And like I said, we're going to find out next year. Now, I think it is fair to wonder about Malik Willis. If he is the guy, and he will be next year, or at least he'll have the chance to be next year in training camp in a different location, wherever that is. If he is the guy for a 17-game schedule and the offense is built around him, it is fair to wonder on a week-in, week-out basis how that is going to look with a passing attack, because you saw the way things look differently when Willis gets into the game and the 2 games he started last year and how they changed the game script when he came into that Jacksonville game last year, how they changed the play calling in the game script last night when he got in the game. What did they do? They ran the ball a ton. 2-1. It was a 2-1 run-to-pass ratio. And I think the first 7 plays when he got into that game last night, the first 7 plays were all running plays. And that's fine. And I think that's utilizing what Willis is really good at, and that is getting outside the pocket, a little fake handoff inside where he snatches it back and runs to the outside. And he did throw some darts last night. That touchdown pass to Romeo Doubs, I will give it to you. It is one of the best passes of the year from him or Love. On the money, in stride, 40-yard strike, touchdown to Doubs. And the pass he had to Jaden Reed in overtime on that first drive, when I think Willis was a little banged up. Remember, Willis got hurt, too, at the end of that game. Did you see Josh Jacobs is the emergency third quarterback? They don't have a third quarterback, which is, I think a lot of teams are like that. But Willis got hit on that final play after the Bears tie the game. They kicked the ball. Packers had the ball with, 25 seconds left and 3 timeouts. I was wondering how aggressive they were going to be there. They tried one play to see what they could get, got nothing, and then decided to eat it. On that play, he got hit, and his shoulder got driven into the ground. I thought, oh, my God, are we going into overtime? And Josh Jacobs is hurt, by the way. And it looks like he re-injured his knee last night, and I don't think he played from the fumble on, basically. He was on the field for the onside kick, and that was it after the fumble. I don't believe he got benched for the fumble, even though maybe you could argue he should have been. I believe that was more to do with the injuries, and he probably shouldn't have been out there to begin with. Anyway, that pass to Reed in overtime was also a bullet. But you, in a 17-game schedule, in an offense built around Malik Willis, a 2-1 run-to-pass ratio in the year of our Lord 2025 is not going to work. Malik Willis is going to have to, as the starting quarterback on his own team, Malik Willis is going to have to throw the ball 20-plus times, 25-plus times every game, maybe 30 times a game. They're always with him, I would think, going to build it more around the run and build it around his skill set and the fact that he can get out of the pocket and he adds that element with his legs. But when you look back to the Colts game he won last year, the Titans game he won last year, when he got into the Jacksonville game, he threw the ball maybe 13, 14 times in those games and less in the Jacksonville game because he came in the second half. But if you go back to the Titans game they won, the Colts game he won, I think he threw 15 times or less in each of those games. And while they won the game, that is not sustainable over a 17-game schedule in this NFL. I'm not saying he can't do it. Look, he could go out there. Where's he going to end up with the Raiders? Is he going to end up back in Tennessee? Wherever he ends up, maybe he does thrive and they find a really good balance and we find that he can complete 65% of his passes and a 2-1 touchdown to pick ratio and he doesn't turn the ball over. I hope that as long as it doesn't come at the expense of the Packers, wherever he ends up in the offseason, I hope he has nothing but success moving forward, even though if he does and Jordan Love flounders, then we're back in that conversation. But I do think it is a fair thing to wonder about if over the course of a 16, 17-game schedule where he's going to have to throw the ball more consistently, what that looks like on a week-to-week basis. But he is a good quarterback, and Jordan Love is a good quarterback, and I still think Love's ceiling is higher than Willis's, but Willis If Willis has to play against Baltimore this weekend, I feel like we can win that game. If he has to play in Minnesota, the regular season finale, I think we can win that game. Like I said, if I think in the LaFleur scheme, if he had to start 16, 17 games and lead this team, I think they're 9-8. I think they're 10-7 or 8-9, 9-8, 10-7, somewhere in there. That's a really good thing to have as a backup quarterback, and we are going to miss him next year. So that's, to me, the Love Willis conversation. But yeah, when he got in and he started playing well, I thought, oh no, I'm so happy they're going to win this game, but then I'm going to have to fight again. Then I'm going to have to start fighting again. Two other players I want to talk about, and then I want to throw a hypothetical your way. Keyshawn Nixon, it's over. They have no options right now, but Keyshawn Nixon as the number one corner, over. He has had some nice pass breakups this year. He had the pick where he read it beautifully in the Chicago game at Lambeau Field, the interception that ended that game, and they won that game 28-21. That was 2 weeks ago. Feels like an eternity ago. Phenomenal read on that. He just gets burned way too much. He's immature. He seems to be hot-headed. He cannot focus. It doesn't seem like. He had that play early in the game, too, where he wiped out DJ Moore. Look, everybody, when you're on the field to play and things are happening, you can get hit. You have to have your head on a swivel. It's like a boxer. You always have to have your hands up and be ready. And if your hands are down and you get popped, that's on you. He ran through DJ Moore on purpose because DJ Moore was not paying attention. He hit him in the back. That was a dirty play. It was. So if we want to talk about the dirty play on Jordan Love, which I think it was a dirty play, that took him out of the game, and even the play before that where he gets landed on, that play early in the game, I forget what was even happening on the opposite side of the field. Nixon came across the field. He was never going to make a play on that ball. He came across the field specifically to wipe out DJ Moore because DJ Moore was not paying attention. That little stuff always happens with Nixon, and he's not nearly good enough as a cornerback to justify the hot-headedness, the personal fouls, all that stuff, and he gets burned not once but twice. I don't know how much blame you can put on him for the final play because coverage wasn't awful. That was a drop in the bucket by Caleb Williams, and I don't think you could have placed it any better. But the touchdown pass that tied the game, if you watch the replay of that touchdown pass that tied the game, so they get the onside kick, they're driving, but you end up getting them in a 4th and 4. And one play, and you still win that game 16-9. They bring the house on the blitz. That rookie wide receiver, I forget his name, found himself wide open in the back corner of the end zone. Williams had just enough touch on it to get it to him where he could get 2 feet down and score that touchdown, and they kicked the extra point, which I thought they would go for 2. Didn't you think they were going to go for 2? Didn't Ben Johnson say that? If they would have scored the game-tying touchdown at Lambeau 2 weeks ago, didn't he say in the postgame he was going to go for 2? I thought they were going to go for 2, and actually I kind of hoped they would, because with the way things were going and the way momentum was spiraling away from the Packers, I felt like maybe stopping them on a 4th down or on a 2-point conversion to win the game, what would it have been then, 16-14? I thought that might have actually been the best path to winning that game, but they decided to kick the extra point. But when you watch that play on the game-tying touchdown, they bring the house on the blitz. They sped Caleb Williams up to where he had to make a quick decision. 3 guys go with the wide receiver that was cutting on the in route, and that's Keyshawn's guy that blows right by him to the corner of the end zone. What was Keyshawn Nixon doing biting up on that slant route? It just does feel like he gambles, and sometimes it works, where he gambled on that play that ended the game at Lambeau Field, and he was able to step in front of a pass that intercepted, and he gambled on a play where he thought that was going to be a pass to the cut in. Nate Hobbs was already on him. I think a linebacker came out and was on him too. There was no reason for a third guy to be on him, and Keyshawn Nixon's guy just Cadillacs his way to the back of the end zone. I don't necessarily mind Keyshawn Nixon as a nickelback. I don't maybe even mind him as a number 2 corner, but we have just seen way too much of that where it doesn't pay. Sometimes the gambling pays off, as I know well, and sometimes it doesn't pay. And when you factor in all the other stuff that comes with Keyshawn Nixon has the diva attitude of a number 1 corner with almost none of the play to back it up. So we got to move on from that. We knew coming into the year that secondary was probably the weakest link on this Packer defense. That has proven to be true, or if you can't put pressure on a quarterback, that secondary of Nixon, Valentine, and Nate Hobbs is going to get picked apart, which they kind of did toward the end of the game. But I am done with Keyshawn Nixon, the world of Keyshawn Nixon being a number 1 corner. Another guy that seems to be done to me, Rashawn Gary. you were looking for him in the absence of Micah Parsons to find a way to step up, to put some pressure on the quarterback. And while he did get into the backfield a few times, as soon as he did, Caleb Williams was so quick. It was almost like it hurt the Packers when Rashawn Gary, in the rare instances where Gary would win a battle and put some pressure on Caleb Williams, Caleb was so good at getting around him because Gary has been so slow. And it almost made it a better situation for Caleb Williams. After last night, we are now 8 consecutive weeks, 8, where Rashawn Gary has not had a sack or a tackle for loss. He has 7.5 sacks on the year. He was a Pro Bowler last year with 7.5 sacks, but that was almost by virtue of no other guys wanting to go to the Pro Bowl. And while early in the year he feasted while Micah Parsons was getting double and triple teamed, it felt like he was able to take advantage of that. He has been a ghost, even with Parsons on the field, and now with him not on the field. Last night, again, just didn't do a whole lot of anything. They owe him $42 million over the next 2 years. They can save $10 million by cutting him in the offseason. Unless something crazy happens in the next 2 weeks and in the playoffs, should they get to the playoffs, and he elevates his game. Let's say he goes out against Baltimore on Saturday and has 2 sacks, and then he has a sack at Minnesota and a sack in the wild card round. Unless he has some kind of resurgence like that, it feels very likely that they are going to move on from him because you've got Kingsley Enagbare. I think he's just as good, if not better, than Gary at this point. You've drafted Barron Sorrell. I've liked what I've seen from him in the rare chances that he gets on the field. You drafted Colin Oliver, who has battled injuries all year. Looked like he might play this weekend. Then that kind of went away, but they believe in him as sort of a pocket version of Micah Parsons with that kind of speed and strength. They've got other guys on the rise. If they can save money by cutting him in the offseason and not paying him the $42 million they owe him over the next 2 years, it just feels like we're coming to an end. Unless there's some kind of rally in the last 2 weeks in the playoffs, it feels like maybe we're coming to an end there of the Rashawn Gary era in Green Bay, where he's had some decent numbers and he's had some nice games, but it's been mostly slightly above mediocre, I guess I would say. Mostly middle of the road with Rashawn Gary. And on a week where they really needed him with Parsons down, they needed him to make a big splash play or get a sack early in that game to set the tone, even though the defense wasn't bad. It just wasn't there again for him. By the way, I favorited this tweet just to go back to the Keyshawn Nixon conversation for a second. Keyshawn Nixon, when he was targeted, here's the quarterback passer rating when they target Keyshawn Nixon. Against the Broncos, the quarterback passer rating was 158.3. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a perfect. That is a Mr. Perfect quarterback rating when he was targeted against that Bronco wide receiving core last week. And yesterday, quarterback rating of 135.4 when they target Keyshawn Nixon. So that's not a number one corner. He's going to make some plays probably because he gambles over the course of a 17-game schedule, but that is not a guy you can trust as a number one corner. So I wanted to go over those two guys specifically. Overall, like we said, up until the last 3 minutes, minus Micah Parsons, I thought the defense was actually not horrible. Now, here's the hypothetical I want to throw out to you, and then we'll be done for the day. I got an email. Now, I don't have access to all of the clips we normally play when I'm in the studio, so you've got mail. I got an email that asked me this hypothetical question. It said, John, I know you love love. If you could get Micah Parsons back for the remainder of the year, but then Malik Willis is the starting quarterback for the remainder of the year, do you make that trade? And I thought, oh, God. So that's the hypothetical. What do you do there? You can have Micah Parsons back tomorrow. By the way, Micah Parsons with a torn ACL still might be our best edge rusher. Micah Parsons back fully healthy for Baltimore and Minnesota and whatever playoff game they may play in. Micah Parsons is back and Malik Willis is the starting quarterback the rest of the way. Do you take that combo over Jordan Love comes back and Parsons is still out for the year? I think Micah Parsons is our best player. I know we talked about that when he went down, that you would put Love and Parsons as 1A or 1B as the best players, as the most irreplaceable players on this team. But I think Parsons is 1A probably. If Micah Parsons plays last night, they win the game. If Jordan Love plays, I think they win the game. You know, it's one of those games. I think if Jordan Love plays that whole game, they win the game too. And if Micah plays, if they both play, I want Love and Parsons. I want the alternate option. I want Love and Parsons. In a choose-your-own-adventure book, that's what I want. I want fully healthy Love and fully healthy Parsons. I think I might take that. What do you think? I'll give you a chance to respond. I think I might take that. If Parsons is back fully healthy for the remainder of the year and Malik's the starting quarterback, I think they win their last 2 games. I don't know what happens in the playoffs, but I think they win their last 2 games. I think they beat Baltimore and Minnesota, and they're in the playoffs, and they maybe win the division. Now, I want to talk about that before we get out. There is still stuff to be sorted out here in the NFC North. Clearly, at this point, let's look at the scores going on right now. We've got a Buffalo game. We need to get a win from the Bills today. When I started this podcast, they're up 20-10 in the third quarter. That's big. That Chargers-Cowboys over we have, that's going to hit. 24-17, still 9 minutes to go in the third quarter. What else do we have going on here? Buccaneers are down by 3 in Carolina. All right, anyway. So the Packers are now, what are they, 9-5-1? Or 9-6-1? Are they 9-6-1? No, 9-5-1. So the Bears are in the driver's seat right now. Obviously, they are 11-4. Packers are second place, 9-5-1. Lions are in third place at 8-6. The Lions today play at home against Aaron Rodgers and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Boy, could we use Aaron Rodgers to get a win in Detroit today. The Lions are 7-point favorites. Hey, Pittsburgh needs that game too. They are a game up on Baltimore for the AFC North lead. They need every game too. So maybe Aaron Rodgers can do us a favor today. But now when you look at the remainder of these schedules, the Bears-Packers specifically, the Bears now at 11-4, they have to go to San Francisco, and San Francisco plays in Indy tomorrow, a huge game for my San Francisco to win the NFC West bet. So that's tomorrow. But the Bears have to go to San Francisco on Sunday Night Football next weekend. Then they host the Detroit Lions, the regular season finale at Soldier Field, and that might be a game where the Lions need to win it to have any hope of getting in the playoffs. That's how they end the year. It is very possible when you look at the Bears, and yes, they're 11-4, and your record is, you are what your record says you are, even though when you look at their list of games this year, they beat a backup quarterback last night, they beat Russell Wilson early in the year. When you look at the quarterback matchups they've had so far this year, they haven't faced a lot of elite quarterbacks. You could argue these last 2 games, along with the Green Bay matchups and the Philly matchup maybe on Black Friday, are the most difficult games they have on the schedule. It is not at all insane to think that the Bears would lose at San Francisco and lose at home against Detroit and end the year 11-6. If the Packers beat Baltimore at home Saturday night, another Saturday night game, and that you've got to take on Lamar Jackson, and there's a lot of stuff going on there. So that's this Saturday. And then you go to Minnesota. Like we said, J.J. McCarthy seems to be getting better. They're winning right now, I think. That would get them to 7-8. They are out of the playoffs, I think. They have a 13-10 lead in New York, and McCarthy kind of blah today with a pick and 9 of 14, 108 yards and a pick. But since McCarthy is playing better, that does not maybe look like it's the cakewalk we thought it would be when McCarthy was really, really bad. And the Packers, we know, don't play well in Minnesota. You know the Vikings love to play spoiler. It's not crazy, depending on the health of Love, to see the Bears lose those final 2 games, Packers win their final 2 games, and still win the NFC North. That is still very much in play, given the schedules those 2 teams have remaining. Now, Detroit, if they are to win today, which we hope they don't, if Detroit loses today, the Packers would really have to fumble the bag to miss the playoffs. Detroit has Pittsburgh today, then they're in Minnesota, and then in Chicago to wrap up the year. Yeah, we could really use a Pittsburgh win today. They're still very much in play to win the NFC North. So while at the moment the Bears are certainly in the driver's seat in the NFC North, there is a lot to be determined. They did not win the division last night. They didn't even clinch a playoff spot last night. There is a lot that can still go on there down the stretch run. Now we're going to find out. It sounds like Love, as of today, is still in concussion protocol. They will be testing him. There's rules about how often you can test him, how much of a break he needs before you test him again. I guess the report is today he's still dealing with a headache today. That's probably not great. Like I said before, I do think in a small sample size, I think the Packers can win this game against Baltimore with Malik Willis as the quarterback. I think they can win in Minnesota with Malik Willis as the quarterback. I don't know that they can win a playoff game on the road with Malik Willis as the quarterback, but I'm not scared of these 2 games if Malik has to go these final 2 games. But that will be a big subplot, obviously, all week, whether or not Jordan Love gets out of concussion protocol. But it is worth noting, despite the loss and despite the way the last 2 weeks have gone, the division is still in play. You need the Bears if the Bears win 1 game, it's a wrap. But those are 2 very difficult games at San Francisco and at home against Detroit to end the year. And like we said, Lions might be fighting for their lives in that last game at Soldier Field, the regular season finale. So we are not dead yet. We're not that drunk. We're not dead yet, even though it kind of feels like that this morning. All right, that'll do it for us here. I think we hit on everything, right? That'll do it for us here on your Sunday Eventing podcast. This will be our Monday podcast. It just felt like by Monday, it was going to be an old conversation. So we had to get this out today. We will have a Friday podcast heading into the weekend, getting set for Packers and Ravens on Saturday night at Lambeau. And, of course, by then, we'll know how the rest of this Sunday plays out. But we will chat with you Friday. Have a very Merry Christmas, please. Have a happy, safe Christmas, spending time with family and friends. And we will get back after it on Friday. We'll chat with you then.